This is a story on how my Karen boss demands I work despite my bloody hand injury, leading to a costly trip to the hospital. So I decide to sue her after she demands I pay for the bloody mess I created. I work in a warehouse as a 23-year-old male. It's a decent job, pays the bills, and I've been there for a couple of years. Recently, we got a new manager. Let's call her Karen. This woman is something else. From the moment she stepped in, she acted like she was the boss of the world. It was clear that she had a god complex and seemed to enjoy power tripping. Now, I have a hobby of playing around with balisongs, also known as butterfly knives. I've been doing it for a while now, and I'm pretty good at it. I decided to take it to the next level and try it out with a blade. Big mistake. I ended up slicing my hand pretty badly and had to get stitches. The doctor told me no heavy lifting for a bit, but I figured I'd be okay. On the day of my return to work, Karen starts bossing us around, and I'm thinking, cool, whatever, she's the boss. But then she starts demanding that I lift these heavy-ass crates onto the shelves. I'm like, hold up, I can't do that with my hand like this, and I tell her that. But she's not hearing it. She says if I don't do it, I'm fired. I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place here. I need this job to pay my bills and support my fam. Karen, I can't lift those crates with my hand like this. I got stitches and the doctor told me no heavy lifting. I don't care about your stitches. You're here to work, not to make excuses. If you can't do your job, then maybe you're not cut out for this. But Karen, I told you about my injury, and I can't do it alone. Can you please provide some accommodations or get someone to help me? No, I'm not going to coddle you. You need to work, and if you can't, then you're out. So, I'm trying to lift this crate, and of course the stitches in my hand break, and I'm bleeding all over the damn thing. I ended up toppling over, and the 3 crates I was lifting fell on top of my arm. Blood-covered produce started rolling everywhere. Karen was furious, but not because I'm hurt. Nah, she's mad because the crate is ruined. She starts yelling at me, calling me a liability and says I have to pay for the crate. Meanwhile, I'm bleeding everywhere and my arm is fractured. They rush me to the hospital and Karen doesn't even ask if I'm okay. She just calls me up and tells me to pay for the crate and the hospital bills. The confrontation went a bit like this. Karen, are you serious? You're my boss. It's your responsibility to make sure I'm safe at work and to take care of me if I get hurt. You're a blimey idiot. You should have known better than to try and lift a heavy crate with an injury. You're lucky I'm not suing you for damaging company property, and if you think you're getting a penny out of me, you're delusional. That's not fair. I told you about my injury, and you refused to provide any accommodations. You should be held responsible. I don't understand your logic. But she's not having it. She tells me I'm fired if I don't pay up. So I decide to lawyer up and file a complaint against Karen for negligence and refusing to provide a safe working environment. My lawyer and I gather all the evidence we can, including my medical records, witness statements from my co-workers, and messages of my attempts to inform Karen about my injury and request accommodations. We present our case to Karen and her legal team, and it's clear that she's not taking us seriously at first. She still thinks she can bully and intimidate us into backing down. But my lawyer and I hold our ground, and we make it clear that we're not going to let her get away with this kind of treatment. The case goes on for a few weeks, with Karen and her team trying to discredit our evidence and make us look like the bad guys. But we were prepared for their tactics, and were easily able to prove that Karen was negligent in her responsibilities. In the end, Karen realizes that she's not going to win this case, and decides to privately settle with me. She agrees to pay for all my medical expenses, as well as compensate me for lost wages and emotional distress. I end up getting a quarter of my year's salary and all my medical bills covered. It was a huge relief and satisfaction for me. So that's my story on how I was paid out a lump sum of cash because of my balisong knife hobby and idiot boss. Wow, that crappy boss sounds like a real piece of work. I can't believe she would treat her employees like that. The way she refused to provide accommodations for OP's injury and then blamed him for getting hurt is just crazy. And to top it off, she expected him to pay for the damaged crate and his medical bills? Insane. I'm glad to hear that OP stood up for himself and took legal action against her. That payout must have been sweet. Karen needs to be held accountable for her actions and the way she treated her employees. It's not okay to treat people like that, especially when they're trying to do their job and support themselves and their families. A Karen tried to defend her son after he pulled my friend's hijab off, arguing that he was just practicing his freedom of speech. Here's what happened. This happened to a good friend of mine back in middle school. We will call my friend Habebti, feminine form of the Arabic word for sweetie because she's such a sweet girl. Entitled jerk will be jerk, and of course the entitled mom will be Karen per tradition. In 8th grade, Habibti decided to wear hijab. At a school in which she was now the only hijabi, this drew attention. Some people were so nice about it and told her how lovely and pretty her hijabs looked on her. But others were nasty and Islamophobic. Habibti took everything in stride and treated everyone with kindness regardless. For me, 8th grade was the year of the 2008 election. American history was the social studies course for 8th grade, so a lot of the election was discussed in class. Habibti and I were both in the honors class, and unfortunately, so was Jerk. Jerk was very outspoken in class, and I must say his commitment to his political cause was admirable, in ways, even though his views were polar opposite mine. One view in particular was his anti-Muslim stance. He would make despicable comments such as, "All Muslims are terrorists," and other predictably Islamophobic rhetoric, and he would always stare daggers at Habibti when he made those comments. I don't think he even knew Habibti was a Muslim until she put on hijab. Once she did, he targeted her a lot. He would harass her in class. He would ask her if she was hiding a bomb in her hijab. He would cup his hands around his mouth and go, "Jihad," when she walked into class. On the anniversary of 9/11, he was talking about how Habibti was going to celebrate it. I remember him saying, "You love bin Laden," and things of that nature. During lunch, Habibti was allowed to be excused to pray Zuhr. Jerk would mock her for it. Habibti never took it to heart. She never even harbored resentment. She treated Jerk with the same kindness she showed to everyone else. One day, Jerk went too far. He wound up walking behind Habibti in the hallway and suddenly pulled her hijab off. Habibti was wearing a hijab cap underneath, and Jerk was not successful at fully pulling the hijab off since she had it wrapped and pinned well. But the act was unacceptable. Habibti screamed. I was at my locker probably 10 yards away, and while I didn't see it happen, I turned and saw Habibti scrambling to cover and Jerk laughing and running off, making celebratory whoops. Habibti was in tears. I was furious. This next part I wasn't present for, but Habibti filled me in on the whole story. Habibti went to the office directly and reported what had happened. Jerk was summoned to the office immediately, and his mother was called. She showed up at the school a bit later, and of course, her reaction to her son being in trouble was of the typical entitled mother nature. The principal explained what had occurred, and that Jerk would be receiving a suspension because his actions were discriminatory and hateful, which was not tolerated in the slightest. I was obviously not present for the conversation, so I'm not going to make something up, but I remember the main points of it. Karen was furious that her son was in trouble and was yelling viciously at the principal. She defended her son's actions. She cited freedom of speech, which is one of the most infuriatingly ridiculous things I've personally ever heard. She even went as far as saying that her son was the person experiencing discrimination since he was a conservative, and bitterly spat about the school having a liberal bias. She was threatening to tell the newspapers that her son was being punished for doing nothing wrong and blah blah blah. The principal gave Habibti a chance to tell her account of what was done to her by Jerk throughout the year. She even tried to explain why hijab was important to her, and how it would be like someone pulling down Jerk's pants. How would he like that? Both Jerk and his mom were glaring at her the whole time. Jerk called himself a hero and said he was fighting terrorism. Karen said something to the effect of, "You should be thanking him for standing up for America." Of course the principal was having none of it, and the punishment was firm. And if he was found harassing Habibti again, he would face expulsion. This put Jerk and Karen over the edge, and both of them started verbally attacking Habibti with slurs and telling her to go back to Afghanistan and live in a cave with your leader, referring to bin Laden. The principal had had enough. He told Karen to leave at once, or he was calling the authorities to report her for hate and for harassing a minor. After that, Jerk backed down a little, but still made comments. Habibti has proudly worn hijab ever since, and has always exemplified what a true Muslim is. She has done more charity work and service to the community than anyone I know, and graduated from a top university, and is now a medical student with hopes to do medical mission work abroad. Oh my goodness, can you believe the audacity of Karen and Jerk in this story? I mean seriously, how could they be so cruel and insensitive to poor Habibti? The fact that Jerk would mock her and make such disgusting comments about her religion and culture is bad enough, but then to physically assault her by pulling off her hijab, that's just insane. My own lawyer uncle and Dr. Aunt tried to illegally dock my pay as a nanny, so I tried to ruin their lives. I'm an 18-year-old guy, and I had just moved to Utah in May of 2021 after living in a different state for 18 years, and had just finishing my senior year of high school. I had never worked a full-time job, but I had worked 3 part-time jobs in food service and retail. After moving to Utah, my uncle texted a group chat of all my aunts and uncles on my dad's side, plus my parents in July of 2021. One of their 2 live-in nannies was moving back to Brazil for a family emergency. They asked if any of the young adult nieces or nephews would want to come live with them in CT and be alive in nanny just until December of 2022. I didn't have a job at the time and was actively looking for one, so I told my mom, who asked if I would be interested, to let my aunt and uncle know that I would be willing to go. I didn't really know my aunt and uncle very well. I had only really interacted with them at big family gatherings that we had every 4 years. So after 1.5 months of interviews and getting a contract signed, I packed the bare minimum of what I would need in a carry-on, personal item, my backpack, and one checked bag, and flew to CT. The contract stated that I would be getting $375/W and all my food, housing, I had a room in the addition of their house, car and phone bill would be paid for. Some relevant info about pay was that the other live-in nanny had all the same benefits, but only $200. I had to get them to raise my pay because I wouldn't go if it was only $200. The contract also stated that the household chores, such as the boys' laundry, sweeping, vacuuming, cleaning various rooms in the house, and a few others, were to be completed by both nannies. There was a clause that said that if one nanny was doing more of the childcare, that the other nanny would take on more of the household chores, but not all of them. That clause is very important. The last relevant info of the contract was that any amends to the contract must be agreed to by both parties. This would take a new contract signed by all parties involved. That same section of the contract also states that the contract is still in effect for a month. If either party terminates the contract, that is, we each need to jibe a 1 month's notice of termination. So I arrived in CT in mid-October. The first 2 months went well enough. I wasn't used to working full-time, but I managed. At around 2 weeks before Christmas, I started to interact with my aunt a lot more. Not knowing a lot about her, I was excited to get to know her. After a while, I started to notice she treated me like a kid. I was taken aback by this because I was taking care of her 4 kids, yet she treated me like one of them. I brushed it off for the most part. Then about 2 days before I flew home for Christmas, she made a comment to the oldest, "Big boys don't cry, they work. Fix the problem, not cry about it." This really pissed me off, because she was a child psychologist. A comment like that is one of the reasons I have trouble expressing my emotions. With that as her job, she was the last person I expected to make a comment like that. I left 2 days after to go home to UT to spend Christmas with my family. Enter the first week, January, the week I got back from UT. I come downstairs one morning to see a piece of paper that says OP's to-do list. Now this to-do list have every single household chore that the contract states the live-in nannies have to do. Now I do not like confrontation when I can't control most of the situation. So I call my mom and let her know what happened. She tells me to talk to my uncle and tell him that this is a violation of my contract. As a lawyer, my mom was surprised that he would make this list, as it directly violated the contract. I go and talk to my uncle later that day, and show him the list. He tried to argue that the household chore don't need to be split 50-50, citing the clause underneath. I then point out the final line of said clause being that not all of them could fall upon one nanny. He then took the list and crossed of the line that said, "Pack a snack for the boys for school," and said that the other nanny would do that. This was the easiest task of them all by far. At this point, there was nothing I could do. 2 weeks later, and I am struggling to get all these chores done by the time I'm done working. My aunt and uncle have noticed this. To help me get better at getting them all done, they just give me reminders every so often on what need to be done. This is making me more stressed than I already am. Now, after a week of this, the other nanny's contract is expiring. Instead of renewing, she leaves and goes to work for a different family about 30 minutes away. During this time, my aunt and uncle interview and hire a new nanny. The new nanny is waiting to get a visa to the U.S. It is a week before they would arrive in the U.S. During this week, I am now tasked with 100% of the household chores. I'm working about 12-hour days, from Monday to Saturday. I spend this week working my ass off to try and get all the chores done and take care of the 4 kids. As to be expected, I fall behind. I can't complete their laundry list of items I should get done by the end of the day. I get those reminders of all the tasks I haven't done, needing to be done. That week feels like it took an eternity. By the end, I'm so stressed that I'm having panic attacks at the end of every day and crying myself to sleep almost every night. The start of the next week, the final week in January, the new nanny arrives. He is a super nice guy. He is able to get the hang of stuff very quickly. I start to feel a huge weight of my shoulders when he arrives. That week passes without much happening. I get into a groove and my stress levels are down. Then Sunday arrives. I'm about to go to bed after a long Zoom call with my girlfriend at the time. We had been long distance since my move in May of 2021, when I get a text from my aunt asking me to come downstairs to talk to her and my uncle. I'm a little confused as to what it is they want to talk about, but I go downstairs to talk with them. They both explain that I'm not doing well enough for them to feel good about paying me my $375K pay. They told me that if the other nanny found out that I was getting paid more for doing what they felt was less work, it would be a difficult situation for them. They wanted to lower my pay to the $200W that the other nanny was making. I would be able to get back to my $375W by proving to them that I could do the work. As I said, I'm not a fan of confrontation when I cannot control the situation. So I said okay and quickly ran upstairs and cried for a solid 30 minutes. Afterwards I called my mom to explain what was going on. My mom told me that what they were doing was not okay by any means. It was in fact quite illegal. She told me that I was going to need to stand up for myself and tell them no. I was so emotionally charged that I decided to wait till Monday to confront them about it. Monday I was thankfully off. I took the day to prepare myself emotionally, as well as get a game plan for what to say. I waited till later that night to talk to them, so the kids wouldn't overhear or distract me. I told them that cutting my pay down was illegal, that it could only be done if a new contract was drafted and signed and agreed to by all of us. Even if that was the case, which it was not, it would still take a month before coming into effect. I told them that I refused to sign another contract with that pay. I only took this job because of the higher pay. I gave them ultimatum that they either pay me my full wage moving forward, or this was my 1 month's notice. They both whispered to each other, for what felt like an eternity, turned to me and said, "I guess it's your 1 month's notice them." I told them, okay, and that they still had to pay me my $375 for the remainder of the month. They looked at each other, and my uncle said that they would go week by week to see if I had earned the $375 that week. I told them that was okay, but if they decided that hadn't earned the $375, and they paid me the $200, I would leave at the next Monday, as that would be a violation of the contract, and I therefore would consider the contract null and void and leave. My uncle backtracked real quickly saying, "Well, OP, I don't, that is the best decision for you to make. And I can't make this next part up. I think it's more about the spirit of the contract than the letter." My uncle, the lawer, said that gem. I had to hold in my laughter. I started to walk upstairs and responded as I walked away, "I wonder how that would hold up in court. Food for thought." As I walked to my room I felt so powerful, and had the biggest grin on my face. That night I booked flights for a month in advance and paid for the option to change flight date without paying a fee, so that I could change my flights and leave if my pay was docked. For 2 weeks I felt so good. I had a wave of relief that felt like all that weight I had been carrying was gone. The second to last week of my stay was about halfway through when my aunt and uncle used their kids to try to manipulate me into staying. The kids would say things like, "OP, why are you leaving? Mommy and Daddy told us that it's because you hate us. You don't hate us, do you?" Among others. Then came Friday, they days I get paid. I wake up to see that I only had $200 deposited into my bank. I was supposed to work that day and the next. I wasn't supposed to start till 1 p.m. that day. I texted my aunt, who handled my pay, and told her that $175 was missing from my pay this week. She told me that I hadn't earned my full wage this week. I told her, okay, guess I won't work for the rest of this week. She then came and banged on my bedroom door demanding to come in. I told her she could come in. She opened the door and began to yell at me that I had to work. I was on the schedule. Who was going to take they kids to their swimming lessons today? I said, "I don't know. That's not my issue." She got super red and went off on me saying, "Yes it is. You're on the schedule for Toady. It's your responsibility." To which I replied calmly, "Well, if you pay me the other $175 you owe me, then I'll gladly do that. But since I haven't earned it, then why should I keep working? You violated the contract. If you don't pay me, then T won't work. Simple as that. Also, if you don't want to pay me my legal contractual wage, then I will also move my flight to Monday." She gave me a look I can only describe as the look of death and said, "You're right, you haven't earned it. It's more about the spirit of the contract than the letter anyways. Please, we're family. Why can't you just help us out?" All I said was, "It's not my problem if you don't pay me. I could very easily sue both of you for contract violation and win. But you're right, you're family, so I won't. I should help family, right?" She just stormed off. I ignored all the texts and calls from my aunt and uncle about me needing to do this, or me needing to do that. I waited till the end of the day to see if I got that $175 I was owed. I wasn't surprised when it didn't show up. The next morning I called and got my flights changed to that following Monday. I screenshotted the flight confirmation and sent it to both of them to show I was actually leaving. I again ignored all the calls and texts about, "You need to this or that," and asking me to reconsider. I spent that day and the next packing up everything I had. Sunday evening I got a text to the group chat with my aunt, my uncle, and the other nanny, with that week's schedule. It had me working Monday to Friday. My aunt and uncle had to go into the office of Mondays early in the morning. I wasn't supposed to work till that afternoon. On that Monday morning, after they left for work and the kids were at school or out with the other nanny, I left a note on the counter for the other nanny and my aunt and uncle. It was just a goodbye, nothing fancy. I got in an Uber and got on my plane home at noon. When I landed in UT and turned off airplane mode, my phone blew up with texted and missed calls from my aunt and uncle asking where I was supposed to be working, etc. I sent one text to them saying, "I left a note. I told you I was leaving today. Just because I'm on the schedule doesn't mean I have to work. Good luck finding a new nanny." and then proceeded to block them and the other nanny. When I got back to my house, my mom and dad told me about all these things my aunt and uncle said I did. I told them no, and showed them all the texts and call logs. My dad then called my uncle and gave him an earful about disrespecting me, and how if he was in my shoes, he would have sued you both, no questions asked, and hung up. It's been 4 months since then, and my aunt and uncle have been all but cut out of all of my dad's side of the family once they tried to use them to get at me and my parents. I now am working full-time at a much better job, and learned how to stand up to unreasonable bosses. Wow, the OP's aunt and uncle sound like a pair of crazy villains in this story. I can't believe they tried to dock the OP's pay as a nanny and treated him like a child. The way they treated the oldest child with such disrespect is just mind-blowing. The fact that the aunt is a child psychologist makes it even worse. I can't even imagine being in the OP's shoes and having to deal with such ridiculous behavior from my family. Kudos to the OP for standing up for themselves and leaving the situation. He deserves so much better than that. But you know what I deserve? A like and a sub? Okay, maybe I don't deserve it, but I'd really appreciate it. Check out one of the videos on the screen if you're cool like me.